The Devil's Reactor by Dakota Storm, Bogan Thompson.
A hand reached out of the bog. It was thick with ancient muck and grasped for something to assist in pulling itself to safety. A gnarly tree root was soon discovered, and the hand feverishly gripped it. A man attached to the hand burst out from the bog, greedily sucking air into his lungs. The ancient bog had high levels of mercury and other chemicals. It was a miracle that the man had survived. The man was from the future, and he wasn't an ordinary man. He had a mission: stop the end of the world. Another man, many miles away, was walking down the street. It was a bright sunny day, and he'd just been to the shops to pick up some eggs and bacon and other things. His name is Leonard Triton, famous for his gift of reading the future and people's minds. A woman stops him and starts to chat. Her brother has recently had surgery on his foot, but Mr. Triton can see into the woman's mind. She's lonely, bored, and depressed, and desperate to talk with anyone. So the man just stands there and listens, making the occasional comment. This woman has been his neighbour for 20 years, and he knows everything about her, but she knows next to nothing about him. Triton wishes her well and goes indoors, puts his shopping into different cupboards and his fridge, and makes himself a cup of tea. Triton can't make up his mind. Does he want a custard cream, or does he want a chocolate digestive? After a few moments of contemplation, he chooses the chocolate digestive. He needs a little bit of fibre. He hasn't had a good bowel movement for 2 days, and one would be welcome. Triton had performed on the stage, reading people's minds, telling some of their harmless secrets to the audience, telling them what was in store for them in the future. All in truth, some would live to a ripe old age. Others would be hit by a bus on the way to the post office. Mr. Triton had had quite a lot of success, and had made a sizable sum. Bought his own house, a nice car with good miles to the gallon, and lived by himself. After Triton had finished his tea, reclined his big comfy armchair, and decided to have a doze. He hadn't had much sleep recently. He had had a funny feeling in his chest. It wasn't a heart problem, neither was it indigestion. It was just a feeling. The man from the bog had walked several miles and stolen several items of clothing from people's garden washing lines. The most daring thing he'd done so far was opening someone's conservatory door and taking a pair of battered boots. Now, fully dressed, he needed to reach his objective, but he had no transport, no money, and only a very basic understanding of how the world worked. The man from the bog watched a family pull out of their driveway in an expensive car, and he decided to go into their house and search for currency. He broke the back door lock with a stone garden ornament and went in. He checked the children's bedrooms first and carefully pulled out the bungs on the piggy banks. They were pink with little black eyes, and the man from the bog smiled a little. Such creatures hadn't existed for nearly 150 years from when he came from. The man took the money and placed it inside a bag made from cloth. He hunted around the parents' room, making sure to carefully put things back in the same place. Altogether, he managed to gather together £200. He left the way he had come in, a little annoyed at the fact that he had been unable to repair the lock. He had also taken an apple from the fruit bowl on the way out. His digestive system was just beginning to ache. The bog man passed by a row of advertisement boards and was fascinated by what it was that they were trying to sell. Internet broadband, mobile phones, offers in supermarkets. Using these adverts, he made himself a name. Crawford Jacobs. Now, he just needed to reach his destination. Dwight Edwardson sat at the head of the meeting table. His lackeys were talking, but he wasn't listening. Whatever he said would happen. In the end, it wouldn't matter about their advice. He owned the company. One of his underlings was saying something to him. "We are hemorrhaging money, Mr. Edwardson. This fusion power reactor is draining our bank account. We cannot possibly hope to keep afloat for more than a year at this rate." "The scientists have told me that the reactor will be ready in 3 months' time," says Mr. Edwardson. "Have they guaranteed that?" asks one of the other men at the table. "Yes," replies Mr. Edwardson. "Give or take a couple of weeks, the world will be changed forever. Our investors are worried that their funding is being stored and that we're just a fraud." "Gentlemen," says Mr. Edwardson, "I do not care what the investors say, or what their beliefs are. All I am interested in is the result. I call this meeting to a close." Mr. Edwardson gets up from his chair and walks to his office. "I must see Mr. Edwardson," says Crawford to the fat woman behind the desk. "I'm sorry, but unless you have a business appointment with Mr. Edwardson, then I can't let you into his office." Crawford had been waiting for 3 hours, sitting on an uncomfortable chair, to be told those words, and it filled him with an emotion he could not quite understand. His mind ticked over and eventually discovered that the feeling was anger. His brain took the appropriate actions and released some hormones to relax him. "Thank you," said Crawford to the fat woman behind the desk, and he left. Crawford needed a way in to talk with Mr. Edwardson, otherwise the world would be ruined. He stopped off at a restaurant that sold highly processed food that it called burgers. Whilst there, he felt an odd sensation in his brain, almost as if there was another mind inside it, peeking at what he knew. A man in his mid-60s was slowly masticating his food with his eyes closed, just a few tables away. Triton had felt the pain in his chest intensify when a young man had come into the restaurant. He'd felt that this man was not quite normal. He was different, and if the feeling in his chest meant anything, then it was that he needed to investigate further. While Triton ate, he probed the young man's mind. There wasn't much in his mind. An intention to save people, terrible scenes of carnage, like he had seen a war of huge scale. Triton decided to speak to the young man when he left. He would follow him and offer him a ride in his car. A few moments later, the young man put his used-up burger carton into the bin and strode out of the door. Triton waited 60 seconds and followed him. He watched the direction that the young man was taking and plotted the correct route to take before getting into his car. Crawford was walking along the grey, cracked pavement, pondering his options, when a car pulled up alongside him. "Excuse me," asked Triton. "Could I interest you in a ride to your destination?" "Thank you, but I am quite content to walk," replied Crawford. "I might be able to help you, Mr. Jacobs," said Triton. "May I ask how you know my name?" asked Crawford. "It's all in the mind," replied Triton, tapping the side of his head with his finger. Crawford weighed up his options and got into the car. "So," said Triton as he drove off, "you're from the future." "How do you know this?" asked Crawford. "I have a gift, that's all," replied Triton. "Then you must surely know what I am here to do," says Crawford. "I'd like to hear all the details," said Triton. "I'll take you back to my house. We can talk there." It took half an hour to reach Triton's house, and in that time Crawford sat straight in his seat, contemplating his situation. Who was this mysterious man? Why did he want to help him? Did he mean to kill him? There were so many paths that could be taken, but he needed more information to work out a course of action. They reached Mr. Triton's house and swiftly made their way inside. It was a nice house, and it was well furnished, with plush carpets, comfortable chairs, and a huge set of shelves with well over 200 books on it. "Make yourself comfortable," said Triton. "I'll make us a cup of tea." A few minutes later, Triton brought in a tray with biscuits and hot, steaming cups of tea. "So," said Triton, "maybe you can give me a good explanation of why you are here and what you're here to do." "May I ask you a question?" asked Crawford. "Of course," replies Triton. "Why do you want to help me? And how did you know my name?" "I have a gift," replies Triton. "I can read people's minds and the future, though I don't use either of those abilities very much anymore. I had an odd sensation a few days ago, a tightening of the muscles in my chest, and today when you came into that restaurant, the pain from my chest increased. And that is why I probed your mind, and through that I know you have been sent to save the future." "I see," says Crawford. "I shall now explain my mission. I have been sent back from the year 2273. I am here to make sure that the fusion reactor being developed by Dwight Edwardson and his company is not switched on. If it is, it will send out a wave of energy, destabilizing every nuclear power station and warhead in the world, and one by one they will explode or melt down, causing irreparable damage to the atmosphere, and wipe out nearly all life on Earth." "What is this fusion reactor?" asks Triton. "I'm not sure what it is." "The fusion reactor is an experimental energy source. Other countries are in development of the same technology. So far as of this time, China has been the most successful country. The one being funded by Mr. Edwardson is much larger than the other countries' versions. They are much, much smaller." "How do these fusion reactors work?" asks Triton, leaning back into his chair. "The fusion reactor generates electricity by using heat from nuclear fusion reactions. In the process, two lighter nuclei combine to form a heavier nucleus while releasing the energy. Mr. Edwardson's reactor goes wrong. A theory from my time proposes that there is a breach in the containment unit and it causes a reaction that spreads out of control." "Okay," says Triton. "What is the result of the various nuclear meltdowns and explosions?" "The world is practically destroyed," explains Crawford. "The chaos caused by the multiple disasters causes huge underground volcanoes to erupt and block out the sun. The radiation is extremely high, the ozone layer is ripped to shreds, leaving very little of it intact. Tsunamis flood the continents, billions of lives are lost, the entire Asian continent sinks, and the wildlife is all dead, save for a few cockroaches, but even they have died." "There's something that you're not telling me," says Triton. "What is it? I can feel it. It's something bad." "After the first 10 years, Crawford continues, the world is still suffering. Volcanoes are still erupting, the mantle of the earth is damaged, and only 2 million people scattered all over the world have survived. Some were in deep tunnels, a few were in bunkers, mostly government officials, and some scientists and doctors. It was after these 10 years passed that a team of soldiers was sent out to observe the carnage with the naked eye. They were sent out in specially constructed suits made from lead and other radiation-proof materials. The probability of them surviving the radiation was still very low, though, due to its intensity. When they reached the outside, they saw creatures. That is all they could describe them as. One person described them as demons." "What did they look like?" asked Triton. "From the descriptions, they were huge, monstrous things, herding people into the volcanoes in huge droves." "I thought that everyone on the surface had died," said Triton. "They had," replies Crawford. "The demons, as they were referred to, herded great masses of these people into the volcanoes. One of the soldiers who was sent out was ordered to go and retrieve one of them. He went and tried, but they didn't succeed. The people that were being herded were made of some sort of energy. The more religious survivors claimed that the radiation had made the souls of the dead visible to the naked eye, and that the demons were in fact collecting them and herding them to hell. "What did the scientists think?" asked Triton. "They would surely have put him in an argument to such beliefs." "They had no explanation," replies Crawford. "There was no explanation that science could produce, and many of the surviving scientists also believed that they were seeing the souls of the dead." "If the world was in such chaos, then how did you get here?" asks Triton. Over many years, contact was made with other survivors, and they eventually came together via a system of tunnels that were discovered. Researchers from the Hadron Collider had managed to survive and stored the information that they had gathered over the years from being lost. Before the fusion reactor incident, the scientists at the Hadron Collider had discovered a new particle that they claimed did not fit within the laws of physics. It was later learned that these particles were in fact part of the fabric of time itself, and so they began experimenting. They rebuilt the Hadron Collider and harvested as many of the particles as was deemed safe, and they were mixed with various chemicals and radiations. It was eventually discovered that mixing the time particles with nullified uranium and liquid mercury produced a reaction that created time travel. But without any way to control it at first, it was impossible to use. Eventually, though, they began to send clones through. They were programmed to leave a mark in history. An example of this activity is the existence of the stone spheres of Costa Rica. "I see," says Triton. "Yes, I've heard of them. I have another question for you." "What is it?" asks Crawford. "I have looked into your mind. I felt like you only have your mission. You don't seem to live for anything else." "I understand your confusion," says Crawford. "I am a robot. I am a cloned human being at the peak of physical strength, and my brain is genetically engineered. I have only ever known the mission. My emotions are stunted via releases of specific hormones and lack of exposure. I have been bred for the specific purpose of stopping the fusion reactor." "It's extraordinary," said Triton. "So far, 123 clones have been manufactured. I am the 123rd to be sent through the time mix." "So," says Triton, "you need to get into Mr. Edwardson's office to speak with him." "Correct," replies Crawford. "Tomorrow I will get us in there," says Triton. "I'm going to need an awful lot of rest, and a good strong cup of coffee to even try what I want to do." "What are you planning?" asks Crawford. "I can enter people's minds," explained Triton. "I will try to block the minds of anyone near Mr. Edwardson's office. We will become part of the surroundings. I will try and trick them into believing that we're not there." "Have you done it before?" asks Crawford. "Many years ago, yes," replies Triton. "I managed to keep it up for about 3 minutes, but I've gotten much older since then, so I don't know how long I'll be able to keep it up. I suggest we get close to his office, and then, when I have blocked their minds, we make a sharp dash into his office, close his door, then I can release my hold on them. We'll do the same thing on the way out as well." "Do you think it will work?" asks Crawford. "I think so," said Triton. "Now then, you might be a clone, but you're still human, and I can tell that you haven't slept since you got to our time. So you can sleep in the spare room until tomorrow." "Sleep?" says Crawford confusedly. "What is sleep?" "It's when your body relaxes and your mind rests," explains Triton. "Sometimes you see things while you're asleep. These are called dreams. Perfectly harmless, but they are not real." Triton led the man from the future to a blue-walled room with a queen-sized bed and left him to go to sleep. "I wonder if I'll be able to block those people out tomorrow," thought Triton, brushing his teeth. I've seen into that man's mind, and everything he says seems to be true. I can only hope that we can rush in and out of that Mr. Edwardson's office. I'd hate to know what would happen if I failed. The next day came. It was bright, warm and sunny. Dwight Edwardson's building glistened in the sunlight. "Okay, here's the plan," Triton said to Crawford. "We will get to the floor that holds Edwardson's office. Then I will block us from view." "Are you sure that you are able to perform this task?" asked Crawford. "I have been programmed to use strategy to gain access." "Trust me," said Triton. The man from the future opened the door to Edwardson's building, and they swiftly made their way to the stairs. "Would it not be faster to use the lift?" asked Crawford. "It would attract too much attention," Triton replied. The two men make their way down a long grey corridor to the doors of a huge waiting room. "How many people are there?" Triton asked Crawford, who was looking through one of the door windows. "4," he replied. "Good," returned Triton. "The less the better. Can we open the door from out here, or do we need to ring a buzzer?" "The door is not locked," replied Crawford. "Let's go," said Triton. The two men ran into the room and dashed towards Mr. Edwardson's office. Crawford noticed that Triton had gone bright red with the strain of blocking people's minds from seeing them, and they quickly entered Edwardson's office. Mr. Edwardson looked up from his paperwork at the two intruders and frowned. "Who let you in here?" "I did not say that you could enter my office. Who do you think you are?" "We let ourselves in," replies Triton. "There's no point calling for help either, no one can hear you." "What's this all about?" demanded Edwardson. "Your fusion reactor is a danger," began Crawford. "It will destroy humanity and release creatures from hell. From what I have been told, you are the head financer and operator of the fusion reactor project." "Don't be ridiculous," said Mr. Edwardson. "The fusion reactor is a clean and safe way to make electricity. It has had numerous safety checks, and anyway, the technical scientists have assured me that nothing can go wrong." "Your scientists are wrong," said Crawford. "The fusion reactor will detonate and cause all but 2 million people to die." "Bullshit," returned Edwardson. "What are you from? The future?" "Yes," replied Crawford. "I am a clone, one of many that have been sent back throughout the years. The others were to mark the events in history so that I could be accurately sent to stop your machine." "You're balmy," exclaimed Edwardson. "Perhaps I can help to convince you," says Triton. All of a sudden, Dwight Edwardson's mind is filled with apocalyptic visions of the future. He sees the terrifying demons, the herds of souls being led to the open volcanoes, sees the despair created by his machine. Triton suddenly disconnects, stunned. He has seen into Mr. Edwardson's mind, seen its twisted, grotesque heart. "He wants it to happen," said Triton, stumbling backwards. "What do you mean?" asked Crawford. "I hate mind readers," said Edwardson, a cruel, thin-lipped smile splitting his face. "I am here to end this world, and neither you or your future friend will stop me." With a flick of his fingers, the two men were slammed against the wall. "I have spent centuries trying to do this," explained Edwardson. "I've used cults, caused wars, and there's always something that goes wrong. I detest you humans, but you have your uses. Your technology, for instance, will propel you to hell." Edwardson, using a force invisible to the naked eye, draws Crawford towards him. "I did not expect to have a man from the future try to stop me. I am impressed, but that is where my interest fades. As for your mind-reading friend, I'm glad to see that some humans have gained powers, or perhaps, as I should say, rediscovered them." "Who are you?" Triton asked from the wall. "I am your inevitable fate," replied Edwardson. "You have amused me. Now go." The two men are thrown out of the office and land on the floor in the middle of the waiting room. The two men jump to their feet and rush out of the doors and down the stairs. and carry on running until they are far away from Edwardson's building. "What do we do?" asked Crawford, catching his breath. "I was not equipped with the skills to fight supernatural beings." "There is something we can do," replies Triton. "There is a man. He lives a solitary life, but I know him. If we can get to him in time, then we have a chance." "Where does he live?" asks Crawford. "I may know him from the information that was loaded into my brain." "Bonus on Windermere," says Triton. "I do not know of any people with any connections to the supernatural in the area." "We'll drive there now," says Triton. "How do you know this man?" asks Crawford. "He helped me gain control of my gifts," explains Triton. "I was unable as a young man to control my mind from receiving brainwaves from other people. He gave me the ability to do that." "He must be very kind and intelligent," says Crawford. "He is," says Triton. "What is his name?" asked Crawford. "Sycamore," replies Triton. "Patrick Sycamore." "Hi," said the older woman. "Can I speak to you about the watchtower?" "I'm sorry, I'm a Catholic," said the older man. The man shut the door, went back to his old armchair, followed by his faithful friend, Max. The phone began to ring, and the older man picked up the receiver. "Sycamore here," says the man. "No, I'm not interested in your insurance. Goodbye." Sycamore put down the phone receiver and relaxed. "I hate cold callers," he thought to himself. Sycamore's body tensed as Max barked loudly at the living room door. The older man picked up a heavy oak crucifix and stood up. All of a sudden, the door shattered into splinters and a huge red-skinned monster charged through. It stood 7 feet tall, and its leathery wings were folded on its back. Saliva oozed from its mouth, and its black claws shone in the lamplight. Max leapt and clamped his jaws around one of the demon's wings, ruining it. The demon charged Sycamore, and together they crashed through the wall to the outside. Triton pulled his car up to the curb and watched Crawford come out of his sleep. "We're here," said Triton. "This is Sycamore's house?" said Crawford. "I do have some information on the building." "What information?" asked Triton. "Satellite imagery found it in near mint condition," explains Crawford. "The scientists could not understand how it had survived the cataclysm." "That's Sycamore for you," said Triton. All of a sudden, a portion of the wall exploded from the house, sending bricks and pieces of woodwork everywhere. A huge creature and a man were locked in a grisly fight to the death. A large Rottweiler was also contributing to the fight. "Sycamore?" asks Crawford. "Sycamore," replied Triton. Sycamore landed a blow to the demon's rib cage and snapped several of the bones. "Why are you here?" he shouted.
"To kill you,"
exclaimed the demon. "Obviously," returned Sycamore. The demon threw Sycamore off of him and into a bush in the large garden. The red-skinned devil turned to face the slabbering, red-eyed dog that had bitten his wing, and found himself stunned as the big Rottweiler jumped and embedded his 2.5-inch canines into his face. The bite burned, and the demon realized that this was a blessed dog, baptized by the Vatican. The demon felt a second source of pain, as something sharp pierced his skin on his back. Sycamore had picked up his pitchfork that had been lying next to one of his flower beds, and charged the demon while he was distracted. The iron points on the pitchfork sizzled the demon's flesh, inside and out. "Who sent you?" Sycamore asked. Max let go of the demon's face and started biting chunks off of its legs.
"I will not say,"
the demon yelled, spreading his damaged wings and beginning to flap them hard. The demon took off, with Max holding onto his leg and Sycamore around his waist. "This is going to be ugly," Sycamore commented to himself as they gained altitude. Sycamore touched the crucifix to the demon's skin and heard it burn and sizzle. The demon screeched in pain, and they began to descend into a lilander bush. The demon, too exhausted by the fight, lay in the bush twitching. Sycamore stood over the monster and looked into its eyes. "What do you want?" he asked the demon.
I refuse to answer,
replied the demon. Sycamore bent down and pushed the crucifix into the demon's chest until it burned through to the beast's heart. The demon screamed and began to blacken as it burned from within. Once the demon was dead, Sycamore pulled his hand out of the shriveled corpse and sat down on the grass, scratching Max's ears. Two men came over the lawn at high speed. Sycamore recognized one of them. His name was Leonard Triton. The other one, though, he did not. "Who's your friend?" Sycamore asked as they came to a stop. Triton relayed some of the information to his friend using his mind, and Sycamore stood up. "Well," he said, "that's a first." "We need your help," says Crawford. "Come indoors," says Sycamore. "We can talk about it over a cup of tea." After the tea had been brewed, and a contractor for Sycamore's wall had been called, the three men sat down and talked. "Dwight Edwardson is a multi-billionaire," explained Crawford, "and wants to be the first to create usable fusion energy technology. His reactor goes wrong and wipes out most of humanity. I am a clone sent from the future to stop this event from happening. But unfortunately, Edwardson is more than he seems. He appears to be a demon," says Triton. "What evidence do you have for this?" asks Sycamore. Triton frowns with concentration, and Sycamore sees what happened from his perspective. "I see," says Sycamore, stroking Max's head. "I will have to meet this man personally to evaluate the situation. I need to know what it is that I'm dealing with." "And meet me you shall," says a voice from the living room door. "Edwardson!" gasps Crawford. The evil man stepped through the remains of the living room door and surveyed the men, his enemies. "How did you find me?" asks Sycamore. "Oh, please," says Edwardson. "I know where all of you live. Well, except for the man from the future. He's from a test tube." "What do you want?" asks Sycamore. "Destroying the world to reap all of its souls seems a little out of character for a demon." "I am not a demon," replies Edwardson. "Who the hell are you?" demands Triton. "I am Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, Iblis, Lucifer, and many more names," replies Edwardson. "Satan?" says Triton in disbelief. "I thought you were trapped in hell," says Sycamore. "I trapped you there, if I remember correctly. I killed the host that you resided within and cursed you to burn." "Oh, please," says Edwardson. "I'm the Lord of Hell. I built it. I make the rules." "You don't make rules," says Sycamore. "You are the Lord of Lies." "You trapped one of my underlings," says Satan. "But don't worry, he sent you his love." "You have put yourself into a highly exposed position," says Sycamore. "I could fight you here and now." "Very funny," says Satan. "You know that I am not here in the flesh." "Just checking," says Sycamore. "That reactor is being built, and this world will become mine," says Edwardson. Edwardson begins to shimmer, and he disappears into thin air. "That was the devil?" says Triton. "Yes, it was," says Sycamore. "How do we kill him?" asks Crawford. "Kill him?" chuckles Sycamore. "He can't be killed. Only contained, trapped, banished, and severely injured." "What do we do?" asks Triton. "Crawford, do you know where the reactor is?" asks Sycamore. "Yes," replies the man from the future. "Why?" "We need to get there now," says Sycamore. "Help me get some equipment. We've got to stop him before we can't." "What do you mean, before we can't?" asks Triton. "I've never seen him this powerful," explains Sycamore. "I think he's been feeding off of the energy from the reactor. He's dangerous, and he's going to stop at nothing to stop us. He's not playing a game. He's not doing this for fun. He has an ambition, a plan." "What is it?" asks Crawford. "Do you know?" If he collects and absorbs enough souls, says Sycamore, then he'll be able to rip open the gates of heaven and fight God. Would he win? Asks Crawford. Of course not, replies Sycamore. God created him, of course he can't win. God would need only wish him out of existence and he would disappear. Does Satan not realize that? Asks Triton. He's utterly insane, replies Sycamore. He thinks he's God's equal. Now go on, I'm going to need your help. Sycamore pushed open a pair of doors and led Triton and Crawford into a room filled to capacity with huge shelves full of books and relics from ancient times. What is all of this? Asked Crawford. In my line of work, replied Sycamore, I've picked up a great many dangerous objects that would spell disaster for the world if they were in the wrong hands. Such as? Asked Crawford. Well, says Sycamore, stopping and pointing up at a shelf upon which rested a stone head. That stone head is from a statue in a town where I had to deal with a rather unsavoury wizard. There's enough magic in that to destroy half of Britain. Why don't you destroy it? Asks Triton. You're joking, replies Sycamore. If I put that in a crusher, or I took a hammer to it, the dark forces within would disperse out of it and feed a demon or malicious spirit. How do you stop the dust from gathering in this place? Asks Crawford. Everything here is completely free of it. I have help from a lady I saved, says Sycamore. Oh, returns Crawford. Where is she? She's a ghost, replies Sycamore. Her husband's spirit trapped her here. Horrible man. I freed her, but she stays and looks after the house. Sycamore led his comrades to a large vault door built into his wall. What's in here? Asks Crawford. My most powerful equipment, replies Sycamore. I own a great many objects, but these ones are the most dangerous and deadly. Sycamore asks Crawford and Triton to turn around so that he can unlock the vault, and soon the huge steel door swings open, revealing a spacious interior. The three men step into the huge metal room and gaze around. Sycamore unlocks a wooden chest with well-practiced movements, lifts the lid, and pulls out something wrapped in a sheet. Moving to a small table, Sycamore opens the sheet and reveals a book, quite large, A4 at least, leather-bound, and incredibly ancient. What is it? Asks Triton. An ancient Bible? Far from it, replies Sycamore, although some saints did write in it. Sycamore carries the book out of the vault and sets it on a huge table, with Max sitting beneath it. Sycamore closes the vault and locks its immense door. That giant lockbox of yours must cost a small fortune, comments Triton. 500,000, replies Sycamore. That's cheap, isn't it? Says Triton. I had it transported from a bank, explains Sycamore. It was the scene of a huge mass suffocation. That's terrible, says Crawford. Not really, returns Sycamore. They were Satanists. The real deal, not those twits that dress up in red robes and such. No, these were the type that spread chaos throughout the world. Terrorist organizations, mad dictators, etc. Why did they kill themselves? Asks Triton. They didn't, replies Sycamore. They were locked in by someone else. Sycamore leafed through the pages of the book and stopped all of a sudden. Max, he said, B3, base. The huge dog moved swiftly and silently. There was a scuffle at the base of the bookshelf, and a loud piercing shriek followed by a snapping sound. Max came back, holding the bloodied corpse of some horrible creature. Max dropped it into Sycamore's hands, and he examined it. The creature had the head of a bat, extremely large ears, and a fat rat's body, and a lizard's tail and legs. What in the world is that thing? Asked Triton. It's a spy, replies Sycamore. We call them scale feet, says Crawford. I like that name, says Sycamore. I'll have to write that one down. Sycamore dropped the creature's body to the floor and wiped his hands on a rag on the table. Satan is getting cocky, states Sycamore. What is this book, anyway? Asks Crawford. This is the Codex, replies Sycamore. It contains thousands of years' worth of knowledge. What is it that you're looking for in it? Asks Triton. The Burning Prophecy. Ah, here it is. What does it say? Asks Crawford. Bear in mind that this was written quite a while ago, says Sycamore. It says, on the dawning of the 13th, when the sun peeks over the horizon, a great sea of flame shall scorch the earth and destroy the lives of the many. A sparse amount of people will be left to watch in horror as the great demons and the lesser demons pour forth and ingest the soul of humanity. That's right, says Crawford. Does it say how to stop it? Asks Triton. Let's see, replies Sycamore. The book reads, the great deceiver Satan must be killed with bare hands, and no air must pass his lips. He must become cold and be consumed by the great beast. But Satan is the beast, says Triton, rubbing his temples. The book isn't referring to Satan as the beast. People made that name up to scare children, says Sycamore. I know what beast the Codex speaks of. What is it? Asks Crawford. It's a dog, replies Sycamore. Well, we have Max, so that's sorted, says Triton. Not that sort of dog, you dolt, retorts Sycamore. Max isn't the right one. No, this is a supernatural beast. It wanders the East Anglia area. I've been there plenty of times. I've never seen a dog wandering around, says Triton. Black Shuck, explains Sycamore. He's the dog to which the Codex refers. He's ancient. I have asked for his help many times before. He has a history with Satan. History? Asks Crawford. Black Shuck is an immense beast with great power. Such great power, in fact, that Satan asked him to be the head of his hellhounds and lead them into a war against the angels. What Satan didn't realize is that Black Shuck hates anything to do with Satan, and he made this point by brutally mauling him, killing his host. Host? Asks Triton. Satan had possessed a body, much like he has now, continues Sycamore. So, in order to expel him and send him back to hell, Shuck killed the host and consumed it. Evidently, the priest saw the battle between the two and wrote down the account in the Codex. Well, how do we get his help? Asks Crawford. Max, says Sycamore. B9, S2, TT12. The huge dog lumbered over to a set of shelves and retrieved a wooden bottle. How does he know what you mean? Asks Triton. He has an eidetic memory, and everything is labelled, replies Sycamore, taking the bottle. You mean he can read? Says Triton in amazement. To a point, returns Sycamore, taking a pipette from a drawer. He doesn't like the letter K for some reason. Sycamore opened the bottle and put the pipette in, sucking out just a few drops. The paranormal investigator used the dropper to put some of the black liquid from the bottle into his mouth, and repeated the action on Max, Triton, and Crawford. Sycamore took a silver spoon from a box and poured some of the liquid into it. Do we need to have any more of that stuff? Asks Crawford. It's somewhat bitter. Sycamore flicked the contents of the spoon onto the floor, and a tower of green flame shot up to the ceiling. A strange smell wafted through the air. It smelt of wet mud and decay. It was soon followed by a white fog that swirled around. It slowly disappeared, and standing before the three men was a huge creature, some 12 feet long and 7 feet tall. The dark eyes stared coldly at its hosts, and sat down when it saw Sycamore. "Gentlemen," said Sycamore, "Black Shuck." "Where is this reactor, then?" Sycamore asks Crawford. "The reactor is being built in an underground bunker in a privately owned lot in Wistman's Wood," replied Crawford. "That's in Dartmoor," said Triton. "Wistman's Wood is ancient," says Sycamore. "It's part of an ancient forest. It used to cover a lot of Dartmoor. Unfortunately, it's much smaller now." "Do you think it will be easy to get in?" asked Triton. "No," replies Sycamore. "The wood is host to a number of trolls, but it is also host to the Yeth Hounds. They're a type of hellhound. They're particularly savage. I happen to own a number of historical reports of them destroying entire villages in a night and leaving only a jumble of body parts strewn across the area." "Will Black Shuck be able to help in that department?" asked Triton. "Maybe," replies Sycamore. "Most hellhounds fear him, but they also have a deep hatred for him as well." "Why?" asks Crawford. "Well, he doesn't belong to any of the hellhound packs. He's a loner. He also has a lot more power than them. I've seen Chuck plow through swarms of hellhounds in minutes, so he may be able to induce some fear into them." "How will we transport him there?" asks Triton. "We won't," replies Sycamore. "He'll make his own way there. He's very fast." "When do we leave?" asks Crawford. "As soon as I've packed a few things," replies Sycamore. "Go and wait in the living room. I'll be with you presently." Crawford and Triton made their way to the living room and sat down in the comfy seats. "What will happen to you when this is over?" Triton asked Crawford. "With any luck, I will disappear without a trace," replies Crawford. "If we are successful, then there will have been no need to have sent me back in time, and all should be well." "I see," says Triton. Sycamore entered the room in an overcoat with extra-large pockets. "I have instructed Black Shuck to meet us in Devon near the woods. Who's going to sit with Max while I drive?" "Couldn't we just take both our cars?" asks Triton. "I have no doubt that Satan will have spies all over the country. If they see 2 cars following each other, they'll identify us." "Let's go then," says Triton. The group got into Sycamore's Citroen Safari and started off. Triton sat in the back seat with Max, while Crawford sat in the front passenger seat with Sycamore. It took several hours to reach Devon, and they stopped several times at service stations to stretch their legs and relieve themselves using the facilities. The group stared into the dark abyss of Wistman's Wood, and the trees' twisted branches looked less than inviting. "Where's Black Shuck?" asked Crawford. "He's prowling around here somewhere. He'll help when he's needed," replies Sycamore. "What's that?" asked Triton, pointing out of the window. A large hand crawled out of the woods, larger than any normal man's. It was grey and covered in black veins. "Everyone, out of the car!" yelled Sycamore. Seconds after the group got out of the car, the hand increased speed and went beneath the vehicle. "What's happening?" asked Crawford. "Is it cutting the fuel line?" There was a deep, rumbling sound, and an intense vibration from beneath the ground. "The hand is uniting with the body," said Sycamore. "The body of what?" asked Triton. The Citroen Safari was lifted into the air by a huge plume of earth and stone, followed by an angry growl. "That's a miner troll," said Sycamore. "We need to get away now into the woods." "How's that going to help?" asked Triton. "Stop arguing and run," said Sycamore, setting off. The 3 men and the large Rottweiler bolted into the woods, and entered the maze of trees and shrubs. Sycamore heard the growl first. Black Shuck was using the group as bait. No doubt he had a plan that could only be made with pure animal instinct. The minor troll burst out of the ground in front of the group, armed with immense claws and incredible strength. "Stay perfectly still," said Sycamore. A flash of black came out of the trees, and the minor troll was sent flying as Black Shuck ploughed into it. The troll, dazed by the sudden attack, was too slow to stop the huge jaws of the massive canine locking onto its throat and ripping out the jugular vein. The troll dropped to the floor and was still. "That was so fast," said Triton. "The troll will turn into chalk soon," said Sycamore. "We need to get moving and find the base." Mr. Edwardson, possessed by the devil, stared angrily at the crystal ball on his desk. The troll that he had invested so much dark energy into had failed, killed by the beast that he hated so much. Sycamore always seemed to find a way to destroy his best laid plans. Satan closed his eyes and concentrated hard. He sent out a pulse of black energy throughout the woods. He had to stop Sycamore if his final goal was to be accomplished. All through the woods, creatures woke from their deep slumber and began to move in on Sycamore and his comrades.
"Tear them apart,"
said Mr. Edwardson. "Did you hear that?" Sycamore asked. "What?" Crawford asked. "Groaning," replied Sycamore. Listening carefully, they all began to hear a distinctive murmur in the surrounding trees that grew in volume as it approached. Black Shuck and Max tensed and began to growl. A group of people in disheveled clothes crashed through the woods and began to stumble towards the group. "Undead husks," said Sycamore. "Zombies?" asked Triton. "Sort of." Black Shuck and Max fell upon the small army of undead, ripping off limbs and severing heads, while Sycamore, Triton, and Crawford had picked up sturdy sticks and started to beat them back. "Zombies are large amounts of people who have been brainwashed with powder and potion and follow command without thought. The undead, on the other hand, are much worse. You can set them on fire, stab them in the chest, or push them off of a cliff. They can't die." "Because they're already dead?" said Crawford. "Exactly," replied Sycamore. The horde of the undead was soon completely destroyed, and the group began to walk again. "They didn't seem to be very dangerous," said Triton. "They are when they attack in vast groups. They wear you down and eat away at your strength. They are a true pest," replied Sycamore. Black Shuck began to growl loudly. A huge pack of massive dogs had gathered in front of the group. Some were as big as Black Shuck, some were even bigger. "Yeth hounds," said Sycamore. "What do we do?" asks Crawford. "We wait and see if their fear of Black Shuck outweighs their hatred for him," replies Sycamore. "That's all we can do." "Do you see that?" says Triton, pointing at the ground, where a large metal door was built into concrete. "Crawford, open the hatch, go down, and I'll pass you Max. Triton, you'll go down next. I'll stay and get Black Shuck to follow us down." While the three men enacted their plan, an immense hellhound faced up to Black Shuck. When the hellhound got close enough to Black Shuck's face, the ancient beast bared its teeth and snapped its jaws onto the hellhound's snout, tearing at the soft flesh. The hellhound whimpered as Black Shuck splintered the bone in its snout. Black Shuck released his grip and watched the hellhound and the rest of the pack put their tails between their legs and run back into the woods. "Shuck," said Sycamore, "follow us." Sycamore climbed down into the hatchway and met up with his comrades. "How's Black Shuck going to get down here?" asked Triton. "He's behind you now," replied Sycamore. Loud, deep panting came from behind Triton. "Let's go," said Crawford. "I know where we need to go." "Lead the way," returned Sycamore. Mr. Edwardson let out a howl of frustration as he flung the crystal ball against the wall. The Yeth hounds had failed. A man in a white lab coat came into the office and began to speak. "Our tests are complete. I've gone over the calculations myself 3 times and sent them through the computer as well. The reactor is ready." "Excellent," said Mr. Edwardson. "That is the best news that I've had all day." "What happened to that crystal ball you had on the desk?" asked the scientist. "I threw it against the wall," said Mr. Edwardson. "I got angry at something. Now then, let's switch on the reactor." "Are the company representatives here?" asked the scientist. "Mo, I don't want to be rude," said Mr. Edwardson, "but please shut up." The scientist led Mr. Edwardson to the main control room and sat down. "Everything can be controlled from this room," explained the scientist. "This one control panel can increase and decrease power output, switch it off and on, and all the other necessities." "Thank you, Mo," said Mr. Edwardson. "You have outlived your usefulness." Edwardson snapped the scientist's neck between his thumb and forefinger. Satan leaned over the dead scientist's body and pressed the activation button, and the reactor began to combine elements and create energy. The devil turned the power dial up to maximum and smiled.
I love technology.
Crawford led his comrades to an immense room filled with thousands of cables and pipes leading to a huge metal pod. "Is that the reactor?" Sycamore asked. "Yes," replied Crawford. "I need to get to the control room and shut it down. It has been switched on." "No wonder it's warm," remarked Triton, pulling at his collar. "Actually," said a voice from the shadow of the reactor, "the reactor heat is kept within it. I have simply raised the temperature on the thermostat." Mr. Edwardson stepped out of the shadows and crossed his arms. "Satan," said Sycamore. "Actually, no," replied Mr. Edwardson. "You are actually speaking to his host, me." "He says 'actually' a lot, doesn't he?" commented Triton. "Silence," said Mr. Edwardson. "Me and the devil made a deal many years ago. I would help him if he helped me. I told him that I wanted to be the ultimate power on Earth. But my company needed both money and resources. He told me that he had a similar problem. So I said, if he wanted to use my body to live in, then he could. But in order to keep my soul and get what I wanted, he wanted me to end the world. Well, that's about to happen." "This is madness," says Sycamore. "Do you really think that Satan, the greatest liar in all of creation, is going to give you what you want?" "A deal's a deal," said Mr. Edwardson. "I believe he wants to speak with you."
Thank you, Mr. Edwardson,
said a deeper voice.
"Mr. Sycamore, you and your friends will not stop me from achieving my goal."
Mr. Edwardson's body began to shake and convulse violently. The seams on his suit split, and dark, almost burned-looking skin burst through. A great pair of bat wings erupted from the businessman's back, and his feet contorted, destroying his 1,000-pound shoes and turning into gigantic hoofs. And the face became lipless, noseless, and earless, the forehead growing a huge pair of ribbed horns. "Shit," said Sycamore. Black Shuck gave an angry growl and ran towards the devil at high speed. preparing to clamp his jaws onto his foe's face and tear it off. Satan laughed, and as Black Shuck leapt, he swiped out his left arm and swatted the huge canine against the concrete wall.
"Really, Mr. Sycamore?"
began the devil.
"Did you really think that bringing my old enemy to the fight would stop me?"
"I had my hopes," returned Sycamore.
"All hope on earth is about to be extinguished,"
said the devil. "Crawford, Triton, make your way to the control room and see if you can shut down the reactor. I'll keep Lucifer occupied." "How are you going to fight him?" asked Triton. "Stop asking questions and go," returned Sycamore. Triton and Crawford ran for the control room stairs, while Sycamore and Max faced up to Satan.
"One man and his mutt versus the Lord of Hell,"
said the devil.
"It feels like a one-sided fight."
"Funny, I feel the same way," replied Sycamore, pulling out a bottle of holy water from one pocket and a steel crucifix from the other. Sycamore ran at the devil and ducked down as his opponent swiped his arm out to hit him. Max made a dash for one of Satan's ankles and clamped his huge teeth onto the red flesh. The devil let out a harsh scream, and Sycamore pushed his crucifix into the beast's stomach, making it double over. As Lucifer's face came close to Sycamore's, it received a splash of holy water and began to sizzle, burning a deep hole in the flesh that began to pour blood. "Possessing this man has made you weak," said Sycamore. Satan tried to slash Max off of his ankle, but the big Rottweiler was too fast and darted away, causing the devil to slash his own ankle with his own claws.
"Being part of this man has had many benefits, such as..."
Satan's body began to twitch, and his skin tore as huge muscles expanded.
"Specially made steroids,"
said the devil as he shattered the concrete floor with his fist.
"They increase my strength tenfold."
"You'll need a lot more than that," said Sycamore. In the control room, Triton and Crawford were desperately looking at the various screens and panels that filled it. "You're from the future. Don't you know what the off switch looks like?" said Triton. "This was the center of the incident. Nothing but a hole was left," replied Crawford. "Well, I can't find anything that we can press, turn, or pull that will shut down that damned reactor," says Triton. "Then I have failed my mission," said Crawford. All of a sudden a loud crashing sound came from the windows of the control room. Triton and Crawford looked out from behind the perspex and saw Sycamore dashing around the devil, touching a crucifix to various points on the beast's body. "Crawford," said Triton, "I have an idea." "What is it?" asked the man from the future. "Neither of us know how the controls work, but the dead man lying on the floor does." "What are you saying?" asked Crawford. "I've only tried this once before," said Triton as he stepped over to the still warm corpse. "The brain remains active for quite some time after death. I'm going to try and read this man's mind." "What happened last time you tried this?" asked Crawford. "I found out the man's name and who his family was," replied Triton. "Unfortunately, I had a stroke 10 minutes later." "There must be a safer way," says Crawford as the mind reader grabs hold of the dead scientist's head. Satan had become enraged. Sycamore had managed to dodge all of his attacks. "Your host is a weak man," taunted Sycamore. "He hasn't the will you need to kill me." All of a sudden, Satan felt Mr. Edwardson's soul burning red with hatred and found strength. Sycamore found himself pinned 5 feet above the floor to the wall.
"Looks like you got that wrong, Mr. Sycamore,"
said Satan, leering at his opponent. Sycamore felt around the wall after dropping his crucifix and found 2 cables. With all of his strength, he tore them from their sockets and thrust the sparking ends into Satan's chest. The devil let out a roar of pain and let go of Sycamore. Sycamore dropped to the floor and rolled, trying to work out where his crucifix was. The paranormal investigator saw Max running up to him, carrying the crucifix in his mouth, and dropped it in front of him. Satan, still clutching his chest, watched in horror as a dark shadow leapt at him and tore into his flesh. As Black Shuck ripped into Satan's chest, Sycamore put his foot onto the beast of the underworld's head, grabbed hold of one of the ribbed horns, and began to pull and twist it as hard as possible. The horns snapped at the base beneath the skin, and Satan screamed in pain. Max ran to Sycamore and buried his teeth into the devil's face, ripping off huge chunks of flesh. Sycamore touched the crucifix to the forehead of the Lord of Hell and said, "I cast ye out, Satan, deceiver of many, corrupter of souls. By the power of God, I cast you out. By the power of Jesus, I cast you out. I order you to return to hell. By the power of the Holy Spirit, I cast you back. Go back, back to the fiery hell where you belong." Satan's body began to glow orange and red, fire erupted from his wounds, and all around him a huge pentagram appeared. Sycamore, Max, and Black Shuck watched in awe as Mr. Edwardson was separated from Satan. Satan's spirit scowled at Sycamore and went to claw at his face, but found himself being dragged down into the center of the pentagram, back to hell.
No!
He screamed as he felt the fire of the underworld touch him. In a flash of light, he disappeared, and the pentagram ceased to exist. Sycamore wiped his brow and patted Max's head before he ran up to the control room. Triton was still holding onto the dead scientist's head, searching through his memories. "What's going on?" asked Sycamore. "Triton is attempting to read the mind of this dead scientist," explained Crawford. "My God," says Sycamore. "The last time he did that, he had a stroke. He can't feel half of his body. It stopped the nerves from working." A loud klaxon began to sound, and red lights began to flash. "The reactor's about to go to critical mass," said Crawford. "We have about 30 seconds." Triton's face contorted with the strain of reading the mind of the dead man, the scientist's brain shutting down as he did so. Then, all of a sudden, Triton let go of the man's head and yelled out, "Orange button, red middle." Triton collapsed to the floor, shaking. Sycamore watched as Crawford swiftly scoured the panels before he said, "Found it." As the man from the future pushed the button down, the klaxon stopped. The red lights turned blue, and the loud hum of the fusion reactor began to dim down. As Crawford had pressed the button, he had disappeared. "Sycamore?" said Triton, staring up at his friend's face. "Yes, Triton," replied Sycamore. "Are you all right? Can you remember where you are?" "Yes," replied Triton, sitting up. "I think I've had another stroke, though." "You seem to be fine. What's the matter?" "I can feel the left half of my body again," replied Triton. The mind reader looked around the room and said, "Where's Crawford?" "He's gone," replied Sycamore. "When he hit the shutdown button on one of the control panels, he wiped out his future." "We succeeded then?" said Triton, getting to his feet. "Yes," said Sycamore. "Crawford's disappearance is proof of that. Because there was no reactor explosion, then there was no apocalypse, and therefore no reason to send him back in time." A moan came from below the control room. Triton and Sycamore walked down the control room stairs and saw Mr. Edwardson, naked, bleeding, and whimpering. "My power," said Mr. Edwardson. "My future. I was going to rule the world." "You're pathetic," said Sycamore, "making a deal with the devil. just so that you could rule. I was immortal, Edwardson howled. If I remember correctly, said Triton, when you made your deal with the devil, were you meant to save your soul by taking over the world successfully? Oh God, said Mr. Edwardson under his breath. You know what that means, don't you? Says Sycamore. Please, pleaded Edwardson, you must help me save my soul. You are going to hell, replied Sycamore, and you are going to burn. Burn for all of the things that you have done, all of the people you have hurt or killed, and the devil, the being that you played host to, let infect your body, will watch and laugh. You have to help me, begged Edwardson. I'll give you anything. I'm wealthy. How much do you want? Name your price. I don't want your filthy money, said Sycamore, pushing the crushed businessman away with the sole of his boot. Money can't save your soul. Nothing on this earth will. Please, begged the foul little man. Help me. I'm begging you, do something. Okay then, replied Sycamore with a sympathetic smile. I'll help you. Sycamore gave a loud, shrill whistle, and Black Shuck came up behind Edwardson, growling at the stench of the businessman's flesh. What are you doing? Said Edwardson. You said you were going to help me. I am going to help you, replied Sycamore, and sending you to hell. No! Yelled Edwardson. Help me save my soul! Sycamore and Triton turned their backs and began to walk away, Max trotting along beside them. As they walked towards the corridor through which they had entered the complex, the last thing that they heard was the howl of Black Shuck and the screaming of a doomed man.